Yeah, we start with this, folks, some breaking news. And the January 6th Select Committee has formally subpoenaed President Donald Trump, commanding him to appear for testimony November 14th. The panel wants documents from him before that, by November 4th. And of course, this comes just hours after his protege, if you will, Steve Bannon, was sentenced to 4 months in prison plus a fine for not appearing in front of that committee. Let's get to our congressional correspondent, Kilmeny Duchardt, for the latest. Kilmeny.
Yeah, Bob, now we have the formality of all of these proceedings after, during its 9th hearing, the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack unanimously voted in favor of subpoenaing the former president. You mentioned two very important dates there. November 14th, that's when they want to get testimony. November 4th is when they're going to want to hand over any and all related documents. We're going to read out for you a little bit about what is in this subpoena right now. He is basically charged with purposely and maliciously disseminating false allegations of fraud related to the 2020 presidential election, attempting to corrupt the Department of Justice, including soliciting and enlisting department officials to make false statements, and without any evidentiary basis, illegally pressuring state officials and legislators to change the results of the election in their states. It goes on to say orchestrating and overseeing an effort to obtain and transmit false electoral certificates. And the list goes on, Bob and Katrina. But on page 5 of this letter, you have exactly what they're requesting from the president, the documents that they want on November 4th, saying that they want all records of any telephone calls, text message, or communications sent through Signal or any other means placed or received by you at your discretion on January 6th, 2021. We knew that when the January 6th House Select Committee had held its 9th hearing, that this was all an accumulation. It was essentially a recap of what we have heard over the past few hearings, all of this building up to the president's role, the president's mindset. But again, criticisms throughout this process all along that this has not been an unbiased committee, having two Republicans that have largely fallen out with the president, not being able to select specific members. So again, this kind of goes back to all of that. We also know that President Trump has hired the same firm to engage with the January 6th committee that we have seen a lot of other witnesses that have testified before the committee hire as well. That's the Dillon Law Group. They've represented multiple witnesses who have appeared before the committee, including the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and a number of others. But really, this is quite interesting timing, because this will fall after the November midterm elections, but before this committee dissolves. Bob and Katrina.
Yeah. Very good. Kilmeny, thank you for giving us that update. Joining us right now to discuss is former Special Assistant to President Trump, Mark Lauder. Mark, your initial response when you see this?
But, you know, it'll be up to the president and his legal team to see how they proceed with this. But, you know, on a bigger question, I mean, this is an act of desperation from the Democrats and the liberals. You know, we're, what, 18, 19 days away from the midterm election, and they've got nothing to run on. They're getting shellacked. And one of the reasons why is I think their entire campaign strategy is based on Groundhog Day. Every day they wake up and it's January 6th, 2021. Well, I got news for them. It's October 21st. People are worried about gas prices and groceries, not something that happened 18 months ago.
Yeah, and Mark, do you think that the former president should be concerned if he's considering not following through or ignoring the subpoena based on the 4-month sentence just received by Bannon?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of issues that his lawyers probably bring up. I think there'll be negotiations there. And the thing I think is important to remember is that this subpoena becomes worthless once we get to January 3rd of 2023, because when the new Congress comes in, all of that work will be over with.
Well, let's talk about the dynamics of that. We've seen President Trump and now former President Trump engage in certain steps that would be to run the clock out. And if November 8th happens the way a lot of people think it will, as you're saying, in January, we're going to change it, new sheriff in town, almost literally. So is it possible that the president buys some time, one fashion or another, to try to wait until after this all possibly goes away?
Well, and I don't think it's just about buying time. I mean, I think it's very important that we look at this in a larger historical context, that this will set a precedent where, where Congress tries to subpoena or compel the former head of the executive branch, a co-equal branch of government, to appear before them. And I think there are a lot of larger issues, constitutional issues, as well as just setting precedent issues that have to be explored here, because how this plays out could set the stage for how Congress interacts with future presidents, or maybe even future current presidents, on whether they demand to appear, subpoena them to appear before them when they are separate branches of government.
Mark, why do you think that the January 6th committee and the Department of Justice waited so long to issue the subpoena to the former president?
Well, I think they're just doing it for dramatic purposes. I mean, this thing is already being produced by a former network television news producer, so it's basically just made for TV. It's having no impact on the electorate. We see on most polls that it ranks down there about 2-3%, consider it an important issue. And so, it's just something for Democrats to talk about, because they can't talk about anything else. They are losing on every single issue that it matters to the American people.
Do you think the former president should show up on November 14th?
Well, I'm not going to give the president any advice, or I'll leave that to his lawyers. But, I do think there's precedent issues you have to weigh in here. I think, obviously, from the way we've seen the rest of this committee operate, it's nothing but a take notes and then leak what you want to. So you have to be very careful about how they use this and weaponize this, because they're not actually interested in the truth. They just want to tell a story that fits their narrative. And obviously, this would be having the biggest star on the planet, coming into your made-for-TV reality show.
Mark, do you think this could rally the MAGA base, because they will be furious that the January 6th committee is actually doing this to the former president?
It probably will, but I'll tell you, from what I see out there, and I just got off of a 3-week bus tour and town hall meetings, the Trump base is very motivated. I mean, they're motivated not just because of Mar-a-Lago and the political persecution and weaponization of the FBI and others. They're just fed up with all of the things that President Trump warned was going to happen actually are happening, in terms of gas prices, humiliation and weakness abroad. All of these things the president warned would happen if Joe Biden and the Democrats took over, and here we are. They want to undo it.
All right, Mark Lauder, thank you so much for being with us, sir. And